June 5th. Welcome to the dark side. Grab a coffee and let's get smarter together. To no one's surprise, I'm not done yet with the Garden of Eden. Today, in particular, I want to go into the reasons why the spin was put so heavily on the consumption of a fruit. Or phrased differently, why eating the fruit became known as the original sin. Yesterday, I pointed out that the fruit stood in as one of countless triggers that will ignite the process of regeneration of a model of the world itself. Sensing a taste, a sound, a scent, a sight, and so on acts like a shake of a kaleidoscope. As a reaction, our high-speed neural communication system will pick up a different set of information from the low-speed intercellular communication system, which it will then put together to a new model of the world itself. This new model of the world itself will not just be a better depiction of a complex system that will have changed since the last generation of a model, it will also give us a different perspective. And a different perspective allows for the identification of functionalities of a complex system one was previously unaware of, and hence allows for the discovery of different approaches to problem solving. In short, considering the generation of a model of a world itself a process and not an event is a question of survival. Exploring while generating is a question of a height of a payoff, a knowledge gained. And in that light, it makes sense that the story about what we now know as the ejection from the Garden of Eden comes right after the story about the creation of a world. In the creation of a world, we learn how an infant and toddler creates their first model of a world itself, or how a stranger does it to become a member. In the following story, we learn how this first model, the Garden of Eden, must be destroyed and replaced again and again and again, and best with ever-changing sets of data. And it also makes sense to call the trigger that starts the process of exploration, which leads to new insights, the fruit of knowledge. Now, who have the people been who put a spin on these stories as they made them part of the Torah? Short and simple, people who identified as uber explorers and were retainers, at that time known as kings and aristocrats. Their ancestors had started out as opponents of standardization attempts that shifted the natural tilt of explore-exploit balance toward exploration, farther toward exploitation of existing knowledge. So their ancestors rejected any standardized work and emphasized in their palaces aspects of an explorative society. In their efforts to establish this identity as an accepted identity, the identity itself became a standard that required tons of other people to fill other standardized roles as well. Retainers, servants, slaves, people who submitted voluntarily or not to one will, that of a uber-explorer. But that was exactly what the old stories that tout the wisdom people had gathered over generations while observing nature argued against. People along with their networks survived and thrived because they explored and enabled each other to explore, then probably thought of as coaxing out knowledge from the plethora of gods and goddesses which were associated with certain triggers. Before the Torah was compiled, the many gods became one, because when you begin to think in standards, the Highlander rule kicks in. There can always be only one that fits the standard perfectly. And once you have one god, the Foreign intelligence, maintaining and updating the world, which is really our own intelligence, but is perceived as foreign since we identify with the self, this one god can then tell his people not to believe their lying eyes. The truth, according to this one God, who had to know because it was his world, was that the single human should strive to stick to the one and only correct model of the world and self, generated once for the human by God, and exploit the knowledge God wants and needs them to have. Total submission to his will, no eating of fruits or seeking out other triggers. That has always been a sin, the original sin, the forbidden desire to explore. It had led everyone away from the right path and toward the pursuit of small goals to gain a short-term personal benefit at the expense of the longer-term benefits of the big goal pursued by God in his creation. Painting exploration as a problem to be avoided, Uber explorers eliminated the need to add new members to a network because there was no need to offset the risk of exploring for the individual anymore. The old model of the world and self of strangers and prisoners could thus be destroyed without giving them a chance to ever rebuild it and become a member. The move allowed for cattle slavery. This new exclusivity of groups also limited the freedom to leave for the members of a group, as other groups led by Uber Explorer would follow the example and become exclusive as well. The spin created the kind of Uber exploiters Uber Explorers need to maintain their identity, even though the existence of both hobbies nature's work around of the time and metabolic restraints that prevent humans from the straightforward conduct of random searches were idle. The spin was even deepened later on when it became clear that humans were no cells and bad at straight-up merging. Uber explorers accepted and accept that everything from the fact that humankind is therefore robbed of the highest possible payoff for all, to violence, to health and mental health problems and so on, are prices worth paying for their identity to be a thing. We don't have to accept it. We can explore and enable each other to explore, also known as think. Make a habit out of thinking. Let's turn thinking into a movement. Like, comment, share and follow, lest you miss a single opportunity to improve yourself and society. Once you do, we'll meet again at the coffee pot.